Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Model Reference Behavior, brought to you by the ACRL University Libraries Section's Professional Development Committee. We're so delighted to have you and our presenters here today. I am Colleen Quinn, member of the committee. I will be moderating this program along with my colleague, Anna Sandeli, my fellow committee member. This is one of an ongoing series of online programs sponsored by our committee. I will quickly pop a link to our programs in the chat there. Before I introduce our presenters, a few logistics. This session is being recorded, and we will send the link of the video, slides, and any other supplemental documentation to everyone who registered for the program. The program will run for an hour total, including time for questions. Please feel free to add questions into the chat box throughout the presentation at any time. Anna will be collating them, and we will be prepared to read them to today's presenters. As you use the chat feature, please make sure you send your message to all panelists and attendees, where it could be listed as everyone, so everyone can see what you're asking. However, if you do have a private question, please feel free to switch back to post to hosts and panelists and include the note private at the top of it, or please email the presenters directly after this webinar. We will post a link to a brief evaluation in the chat box after the Q&A session. So please take a few moments to give us your feedback on today's program. With those announcements out of the way, I am very happy to start today's program, Model Reference Behavior. Our 5 presenters today from SMU are Rebecca Graff, Jalecia Horton, Melissa Johnson, Jonathan McMichael, and Sarah Jenkins. And without further delay, I will hand it over to our panelists.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our presentation today. So everyone wants to provide exceptional chat reference services, and SMU Libraries has exceeded our own expectations. We try to provide exemplary interactions by employing a distributed model for our Ask Us service, meaning library staff across libraries work together to respond to queries. This model includes a team overseeing the program and evaluating chat transcriptions monthly. Using a form we developed, we assess communication style, relationship building, the reference interview, and instruction. And in its present form, we primarily look for ways to improve our service, address training needs, and share positive comments left by patrons. Because of this, our chat service is highly rated. We have honed our services over time and want to showcase our unique way of approaching reference improvement so that it can be adapted for other libraries. So, as we go through this presentation, we will explain some of the context and history of our program and then move on to our overall purpose. From there, we'll explain our methodology and model, and then do some hands-on practical work together. We have saved a lot of time at the end for questions, so if any pop up during this time as we're going throughout, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end, or you can just put them in at the end when we get to the Q&A. As I go through our introductions, please let us know what you'd like to learn today, or what brings you to this webinar in the chat. So let me introduce you to our full LibChat team. I am Jalecia Horton, the Director of Access and Resource Sharing Services, so I bring that access services perspective. We have Jonathan McMichael, our undergraduate success librarian and former coordinator of our intern program. Melissa Johnson, the instructional design librarian for the business library. Rebecca Graff, our humanities research librarian and current intern program coordinator, and Sarah Jenkins, our content strategy librarian. Once again, we thank you for attending our presentation, and I will now pass the torch off to Jonathan.
Yeah, so I want to give you a little bit of a context of how we built this evaluation model. And this wasn't just something we came up with from scratch. It actually evolved over time. And that's a really important thing to think. If you're applying this to your own library, it's probably going to need to evolve. We have an intern program where we are constantly hiring new chat operators. And so getting them up to speed meant kind of monitoring their the quality of service they were providing. And so we developed a way in which we would evaluate their chats to make sure that they were kind of understanding the information that SMU Libraries needed to provide to its patrons and kind of modeling the kind of service that we wanted to provide. We then used the feedback that we got on those chats, and we started to notice patterns of behavior or certain things that we felt like could really improve our services. We started to adapt and customize training and quality improvement plans for our chat. And so what we do now is evolved from that evaluating interns. Now we do it for the entire library. What we found by doing this process is that this constant feedback actually made our newest chat operators, our interns, some of the most skilled chat operators that we had. So this feedback really developed their service. So when COVID moved a lot of our services online and our chat numbers kind of exploded, we thought, well, this should be a way in which we can maintain a high quality of service while increasing the scale of our service as we provide more services to people. So the reason I would kind of give this context is I don't want people to think that this is a plug and play process. Using this with our interns helped us develop this approach. And it also allowed us to build the trust in the communication channels necessary for us to allow this evaluation to improve our service. It required like a proof of concept, alignment with our university or our library's values, and consent from the rest of the organization to kind of make this work. And SMU Libraries has developed an environment where this kind of evaluation is possible because we saw how much it improved our services when we first started doing it. This approach is constantly evolving, and actually it's probably up for the next version of this. We need to go back and probably evaluate and kind of create a new draft of the form soon, because it's been a little bit since we've done that. So I wanted to give you that caveat to say this probably isn't a plug and play, but there are certainly ways in which you need to evolve it to your organization. And to do that, Melissa is going to talk a little bit about what we go for, or what our purpose is by using this evaluation form.
Thanks, Jonathan. So here at SMU Libraries, we believe that our Ask Us service is at the heart of everything we do. And so for some, chat is the first and only interaction they have with us, and it can often be the deciding factor whether or not they return. So incorporating monthly chat evaluations allows us to keep current on what's happening across SMU Libraries, to learn what people are asking, to check in with how we're responding to those queries. And reviewing chats on a regular basis helps us determine if new FAQs are needed, when we should offer a more structured training, provide in-the-moment dynamic feedback, start conversations about our chat service, and then also pay compliments forward to staff. So in essence, it gives us a deeper insight into the library's pulse. We use SpringShare's LibAnswers LibChat platform, and our chat service is online for a total of about 50 hours a week. And we have around 25 library staff, so librarians, library specialists, and interns who work together to respond to questions. Now, since our Ask Us chat service is the initial touch point for so many of our library services, by employing a distributed staffing model, we found that's the key for us to provide exemplary interactions. I'm going to pass it along to Rebecca to talk about our methodology.
Oh. Okay, next slide, please. What you're looking at is the first page of our evaluation form, which is done through Qualtrics. Our sampling method calls for reviewing one chat shift per week for the busiest week for chat for the previous month. So we are selective rather than comprehensive in our evaluation. All of our colleagues are aware that we review interactions and as part of our continuous improvement service. We meet as a group, our LibChat team, and evaluate 1 day's worth of shifts together so that we ensure consistency and good communication amongst us all, and then assign specific days to individuals for the rest of the week. Our assessment form is based on the Russo behavioral guidelines, published best practices, and on our own experiences and institutional needs. We assess communication style and relationship building, the reference interview, and instruction. These groupings are unique to us, I believe. We see good communication and relationship building as the foundation of a positive interaction. And I use the word interaction intentionally rather than in transaction because it supports the engagement aspect of the encounter and reinforces the mutuality we desire. Without the reference interview, we might not learn the person's intended query, since people cannot always articulate what they at first what they're trying to ask for with their help. And we emphasize instruction because, as academic librarians, improving the information literacy skills of our constituents should be central to our reference interactions. Easy for me to say. So let's evaluate. Okay, here is a sample chat. I'm going to give you a little time to review this. As you do, ask yourself, how did the interaction go? Was there good communication and relationship building? Was there a reference interview? And was there instruction? So I'll give you time to read and look at this. While you do, know that Jaleesa is going to put this into chat, so you'll be able to follow along for subsequent slides. Okay, so Melissa, would you explain to everyone how to use poll everywhere? On the next slide.
Sorry, my computer is
That's
not
okay.
doing what I'm telling it to do.
Bad computer, no biscuits.
All right, here we go. I think we got it covered now. Sorry about that. So if you've never used Poll Everywhere before, all you need to do on whatever device you want is join our polling session by going to pollev.com/BUSLIB. And then the poll question will show up and it'll give you either response options to choose, or you can enter your own, as I see people are doing right now.
Okay, so once you're at Poll Everywhere, in a few words, evaluate the overall interaction. See, I'm seeing, I like that one. Cold, it was okay, but did not delve into the information need. Good, straight to the point, gave them what they needed. Pretty good, the librarian seemed friendly. Mediocre, lacked reference interview. I'm having trouble following them because it keeps moving. Pretty good, the librarian seemed friendly. It was okay, so-so. So we're getting a lot of sort of mixed reactions. Some people are very happy with it. Other people have some questions. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing too many more coming in. So let's go to the next slide. Was there good communication and relationship building? The first thing about which we evaluate. Okay. Sometimes seems to have it, although no is coming up. Yeah. All right. I think most of us would agree with that. And next, was a reference interview performed? I can't believe we have over 200 librarians like nearly agreeing. I'm glad I'm sitting down. And lastly, was there instruction? A little bit more mixed in the evaluation here. Okay. Now, Jonathan will go over how we operationalize these categories and how we assessed this interaction.
Hi, so yes, So these are screenshots from the Qualtrics form that we've kind of shared before. And so what you guys just did with us is how we evaluate chats. So in our monthly meetings and we go through the chats together, we kind of calibrate our approach and we sort of get a feeling. Did we do a good job communicating? Did we do a good job with the reference interview? Did we do a good job in the instruction component of that? But we go a little bit more in depth because our feelings aren't enough to go through that. We wanted to sort of translate these into characteristics that we could actually observe within the chat so that we could pinpoint some of the things that we wanted to work on or that could be potential areas for improvement or training. So here's how we evaluated the chat you guys just saw. So it begins with a greeting. We saw a hi and an exclamation point welcoming the person on. We would have preferred probably a name, but we would have deleted that name anyway because we anonymized the chat. So we thought the tone was pretty friendly. We thought we did have a professional tone. We had, there wasn't anything, but capitalization was good. We liked the tone, it kind of matched. Expressed a willingness to help. We thought sometimes, we thought that you're going to find that we don't think this chat goes far enough with enough of the reference interview and instruction. So that willingness to help was not maybe present, but it seemed like they were nice and friendly and actually wanted to provide somebody spread this patron with some information. They did a great job using plain language. You can see here, it keeps person updated or acknowledges delays. In some of our reference chats, we found that we were going 5 or 10 minutes without telling somebody that we were still searching. And that was a real problem for our service. So it's something now we track to make sure that we're acknowledging that if it's taking us a while. We love to see it on the front end, but we at least wanted somebody to say, sorry, I was gone for a little bit. We didn't see a long delay here. So that's an NA. So chunking messages. This is another habit we saw some people sort of getting into that we wanted to make sure that we're tracking. Our chat interface, if you put in long strings of text, it doesn't look so great to the patron and it's actually really hard to follow. So we call this chunking, where we divide up small bits of information. So it becomes easier for the patron to follow and we make sure that they're following along with us. We also want to make sure, we did see that they closed the interaction. They said, you're welcome. Is there anything else I can help you with today? And they say, that's it. So they did try to close the interaction and make sure that they were feeling confident that they had actually answered all the questions that they had. And then the last part is creating a ticket. We actually have on the back end of every chat, a ticketing service that we can start to ping different librarians or other subject specialists that are necessary, relevant for certain questions. If the chat requires, we can sort of elevate that and get them more specialized help. We said in A, they did not create a ticket. We could have potentially had an argument around maybe they should have created a ticket because it is obvious to us as we're looking through this that this is a business student who has a question and potentially this could have gone to the business librarian. And that would be a disagreement, but that's something we sort of talk about as we're going through and kind of calibrating the way we implement this form. The next slide. So moving off of the communication, we thought that went pretty well as far as the communication and relationship building, as far as the tone went. But here you can see in our reference interview, we found this chat really lacking. There's a lot of no's. Restated the question or clarified the information need. They did not restate the question at all, nor did they really get at the information need. They really did the classic behavior of addressing the specific question that's in front of them and not going more in depth into what is the larger information need available to them. So if they're asking for analyst reports, we probably would have wanted to see someone to say, is there a specific type of report you're looking for? What class are you looking for? Which gets into some of these later questions. Determines what they've tried. We want to see where have you been looking? And that would allow us to sort of see where the breakdown is. Maybe they were looking in the wrong place or something there. And that allows us to offer more meaningful advice to this patron. Determines affiliation. We actually don't know if this is a student, a faculty member, a graduate student. If it's a faculty member, that would have been great to know because maybe they're trying to share this with their class. That would have definitely meant that we would want to refer this to the business librarian so that they can talk to them. So determines course information. What course is this for? Analyst reports are used in a few different courses, including an equities course. So like that would be an important thing to kind of know. And we know our assignments well enough that we would be able to maybe offer some more customized help and maybe get in more in depth into the usage of this report. That's the same thing here. The context of the question, what were you be looking for? That would have been great to find out here because I think there's a lot of things left on the table. Confirms that the information need was met. We didn't do that either because what if they were looking for a specific Wall Street Journal article? That'd been great to help them out with. And so these things we would have wanted to see these things in the chat to kind of move it more towards a yes. Finally, the information shared is technically correct. So we feel pretty good about that. There just wasn't enough of it. We go to the next slide. So the last part is the teaching part, the instruction component. And so we look for, the way we kind of think about this is, do we recognize and then capitalize on teachable moments? And so we kind of looked through here and saw there was a teachable moment here. This particular patron probably could have been taught maybe how to use the library more effectively, taught a little bit about how our guides work, taught about maybe they needed a little bit more about how to work analyst reports or how to use that within their own research or an assignment. There seems to be a lot of things that we could have helped this patron with if we had just asked a few more questions and seen this as a teachable moment. Provides context for information shared. So this is a really important thing. We saw a habit of people, some of our chat operators just kind of pushing links at people, but not telling them what they were looking at. We didn't really explain what guides were, what you can find on them, and what they would be looking for on those particular research guides. So that would have been a great place to explain, hey, our research guides are places where you can find links to a lot of the great resources that we have. We actually have some that have analyst reports. Those are the types of things we would have liked to have seen. Shows the search and not just the result. This is actually kind of a difficult thing. Sometimes you'll get permalink searches where we'll send those out. We don't like that as much because we like people to see the full search and have them be able to play around with that. This actually does the opposite. It shows kind of how to search, but it doesn't really show them what they're searching for or the results of that search. And so that's one that we did not feel like met our standards. They do a great job. We do make a lot of learning tools. We have over 200 FAQs. So we pointed them to one of the relevant FAQs that's there. So that's a great job. We have a lot of guides and we really want our users to kind of interact with our guides. If they're not familiar with them, this is a great way to push them into our guides. And we did do a great job doing that here. Refers to appropriate librarian. No, should have been a ticket to a business librarian. That's like, we feel like we might have had more help that we could have provided that person that way. We didn't need to link to the website, and we do have a lot of canned messages that help us kind of respond to typical types of questions. This didn't seem to fit that exact type of question, so we didn't see the use of canned messages, but that's something we want to make sure that we're monitoring. Throughout this entire process, the goal is to break down into these different sections. So the same way you kind of responded to the poll, we kind of have our own vibes of how well that we went this chat, how well this chat went. And then, but these specific criteria are things that we kind of look for to make sure, are we looking for, these are evidence of good habits that our chat operators should take on. This has evolved over time. We've added a lot of things. We will probably update this as our chat behaviors change and as our chat operators change. We might look for different criteria and change the form around. And so if you're trying to adapt this, you might think, what are our main issues, or what do we want to see? And then you start to place that into a form and evaluate that. But the big thing that we like to do is come together every month and calibrate this tool, because if we were to go out and do it all on our own, I think we might come up with very different answers. By doing it together, it allows us to have some meaningful conversations. And then Sarah's going to tell us a little bit about what we do after we evaluate the chat. We're not doing it just for fun. We actually do a lot of stuff with these evaluations once we finish them.
Thanks, Jonathan. So the last thing we do as part of our evaluation is close the loop and determine our next steps. So we don't evaluate the chats and then just have it end there, but rather we use this as a way to improve our overall services. So we look at the interaction and we decide whether we need to develop training or make other changes. We might need to create an FAQ or, change wording on the website, or add a web page that helps people with their problem. We also have monthly training sessions that we call fireside chats, which are they're sort of conversational, informal meetings that we have with all of our chat operators. So we might decide to add something to our agenda for that meeting. And then we mark in this comment box on the form if something would be a good example to share with everybody. If we do determine that we need to follow up with a staff member, then we have different ways of doing that. So it's important to remember that we don't look at this chat evaluation as a way of judging one person's performance. This is really about our service as a whole. So a lot of times, if we see something, we'll just make a general announcement about something that everyone needs to look out for or be aware of. Occasionally, such as when a staff member is giving out incorrect information, we will need to follow up with them directly. And so then we do this either by talking to them one-on-one or talking to their supervisor. It really just depends on the person involved and the situation. But overall, we really view our evaluation as a growth opportunity for everyone. So that's including ourselves, everyone on the team. And it's a way to improve our service and not as a way of correcting someone. So we always try to approach feedback in that way. And that is it. That is our service in a nutshell and how we evaluate it. We wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, and I've been watching them all come through. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we're excited to hear what questions you have.
My goodness, there's so many questions. Does somebody want to curate them for us? Or should we just pick and go?
I'm here to do that. And I see that there are a bunch that just came in the chat as well. So I can capture those
Okay.
as I give you the ones from earlier on to start with. And I feel like we have kind of like deeper philosophical questions and more technical questions. Do you all have a preference for starting with either of those?
Depends on who you ask on our team. Deep philosophical questions, send them my way.
Okay.
And there's some technical questions. I saw one on like our different chat operator stuff. Those are some interesting things there. So yeah, whatever's most popular.
Yeah, there are one that came up was, or I guess a few around the idea of, do you think that it is practical or realistic to expect real relationship building in short chat interactions? And the person notes that's not a criticism, just an honest question. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat as well so you see that.
I think it's fair. And you can see from this one, and I agree with people that maybe it wasn't optimal, but it was friendly enough. And maybe that's something for us to evaluate further, is the deepness of the conversation. For even though it wasn't under the section for building relationship, creating tickets is a way that we really sort of look at that. Whenever possible, we ask for our chat operators to create a ticket so that follow-up can be made if necessary, or a librarian can just check in and see how the person's doing. So that's why it's so important for us for tickets. So yeah, I mean,
I would say this is the thing that Rebecca did a great job pointing out at the beginning, and she was very insistent about like interactions and not transactions. I think it's too much to put on a transaction to say you're going to build a relationship. I think you can exhibit behaviors that make you trustworthy, reliable, responsive. These are the things that allow people to feel like they can build a relationship with the service and the library itself. The ticketing process allows us to follow up. We're careful about doing those. And so we're looking for characteristics that don't tend to harm our relationship building, but enable a patron to feel like they can trust and rely on the services that we provide. And so I think that's really where we're thinking about, is that do we do things that would have hurt our ability to form that trusting relationship? And so each individual transaction, we're not saying, are we now besties? Like, are we now are we a best friend? That's not what we're going for. What we're going for is the ability to allow them to trust us as an institution. The other part is, would they go and tell someone else to say, hey, you know what, the library is really helpful. Like I had this question and they actually tried to help and did a great job following up. And that builds more trust within our community. And I think that's probably the level of relationship building we're looking to try to build, like we're going for.
Okay, lots of good questions. And there was also a question about how to ask questions. And so everyone is muted, so chat is the best way to ask questions. And we are keeping an eye out for those. If we don't get through all of them, we're also recorded. We're also making a note of what's being asked. Let's see. I think that there are some good questions of there are a lot of good questions, actually. I appreciate that from librarians. I guess kind of one of the themes that's coming up is about like scalability and sustainability. So in terms of staffing, in terms of training for newer librarians, and
So
then
for-
balancing right just in time versus there being a longer answer.
So for staffing, for most of our shifts, we have both an intern and a library staff member, a professional staff member together. It's not exactly tiered. They should be having conversations. We encourage relationship building among the pairs. So they should be at the end of their shift, sort of picking a few questions, few transcripts to evaluate together. So that they can continue that feedback amongst themselves. If necessary, if there's a particularly difficult question at that moment, and the intern answered first, they might transfer it to the librarian who's on duty. And it's just, if we see a possible need for further follow-up, we create a ticket for a subject librarian for a particular queue, such as special collections, or technical services. So we have a very integrated system in that regard.
Yeah, and I saw a few questions about this. We do have a Teams channel that runs alongside of chat that if, for example, we get very busy, we can say, hey, can somebody jump on chat and help us with that? Or I'm having this weird question and I think I want to help this patron kind of more immediately. Can somebody offer that? And so we do kind of all monitor that Teams channel as that way. The ticketing system serves as a backup and we divvy them up. Just basically we have queue managers that will look over the different queues to make sure that we're responding in the correct time period. And so I would say everyone who evaluates chat is a chat operator, and everyone who evaluates is on this team has had their chats evaluated by this team in person. Like we'll all evaluate. So I think it's a point to reiterate that like our staffing model is based a lot on trust, and that we do really hold dear the idea that this is to make our services better, and we're not looking to single anybody out by doing this. That we assume that if we see an example in our sample, other people are having the same kinds of issues that are there, and I think our consistent tone with that has enabled us to definitely do that. We used to staff in person, and then post-COVID, we have gone just to a chat-based model. We don't have as many in-person desk shifts, so like that's probably another change that's there. But our interns staff a good chunk of our hours. So we have people who are just learning how to do chat, and they are triaging some of the questions that are out there. And I think the ticketing system is necessary to feel like we can respond effectively to each person's interaction and transaction.
I'll also add that there are days or times where it is just an intern themselves. And so if they get a question that they don't know much about, we say it's best to just make a ticket and continue on from there, where a reference librarian can answer after that. But they do handle most of our chat shifts, and then any on their own, like on the weekends when librarians aren't working.
I feel like you all have touched on this to some extent. I will put this in chat as just a related question. So suggestions for improving chat services while juggling patrons in different modalities. And Jonathan touched on the kind of the COVID and post-COVID circumstances. But is there anything all that you would want to add to this question?
Thinking of it as a singular service has probably helped us a lot. Thinking of Ask Us as a singular kind of, we're channeling things and there's just different ways in which you can get to the same kind of help, but we kind of the same values and ethics and principles kind of apply. They are then just kind of customized to each modality, but you have this larger, this is what we're going for. And that actually allows us to respond to our community a little bit more effectively. We had a lot of desk time pre-COVID, and we actually had a lot of interaction on our desk, and we had a kind of a dual desk model that worked really well. COVID changed everything and changed how our patrons, and we had to respond to that. And so that changed a lot as to, we took those same values that we had when we were on the desk and just to put them into Ask Us, and that allowed us to change that. The ticketing system has probably, we invest a lot into that, and I would say that that's helps us to feel like it's a consistent sort of thing. So that way, but we use chat because it's a primary way, but it's also a good sample for how well we're doing in probably other areas that way. But we, for example, the interns will watch consultations and use the same kind of values to sort of say, are we doing well in our consultations, to do these same kind of relationship building, instruction, and communication stuff as well.
And just to add to that, so when we ask people to staff our chat, we ask them just to be on chat. So they're not trying to juggle a research consultation at the same time, because at any point within a chat that could turn into a Zoom screen share, depending on what the patron is asking, or if that's the best way to help them. So there are other librarians that are still working at that same time. So if somebody does come into the office, there's somebody else that's available to help them. Or if there's an email ticket that comes in, there's other people that are in that queue that can take care of those questions. So we try to train people to think of chat as, when you're on chat, you should just be on chat. You shouldn't be trying to schedule like a webinar at the same time that you're on chat. We want you to be focused on that, like taking a look at old transcripts, reviewing your own transcripts and just playing that, what could I have done differently, or what did I learn from this based on what happened with other questions I've had.
And just to add to that, before, like pre-COVID, we definitely had the model where we were sitting out at a physical desk, answering chats at the same time, answering phones at the same time. And then during COVID, and when we turned on proactive chat so that the chat box pops up on the website to ask if you have questions, we saw like I don't know, do you remember the exact number, Melissa? Like 700% increase in the number of chats. I mean, we were getting like over 500 chats a month during 2021. And that's when we realized that so many of our patrons were asking questions through chat that we really needed to focus on that by itself. And that's kind of when our model changed from, we weren't at the desk anymore, physically out in front of people. And that's when we really started to focus on people paying attention to chat as the service and not trying to do a bunch of things at the same time.
I'm just going to thank our panelists for answering some of the questions in chat. So if you aren't paying attention to the chat, there are some great answers there. There was a question about the use of Qualtrics for evaluation and not a form in SpringShare. And Rebecca mentioned that Qualtrics allows for some more dynamic evaluation methods. They do not require patrons to put contact information or names in chat services. Do ask for that information if they plan to make a ticket. And then answers related to training and orientation that the interns have. Jonathan shared that in chat as well. So there's a question that just came in the chat. Are your chat librarians only reference librarians, or do they include access services and other library departments?
It's mostly reference librarians. Jaleesa and another access services person contribute 10 hours a week, something like that. Somewhere between 10 and 15 hours a week, which we really, really appreciate and helps make sure that all our questions are being answered well.
Yeah, and so we do, our queues do allow us to basically send a question that we would get through chat to basically every part of our library. So they may not be actively monitoring the chat as a chat operator, but they have a presence because we kind of can triage questions to them. And so it then just ends up being like a response time. What is the expected response time you would get from a digital collections question that we would have that way? And so So they do have a presence within how we provide our services, but they don't always staff our chat.
Also, specifically for access services, once we did get that high number of chats coming in post-COVID and when everything was crazy, we did do a in-depth training with our reference librarians on how to answer access services questions, and they were given some permissions in we use Ex Libris Alma, and how to look up a record, an account for a patron, how to look at their books, and kind of understand what's in their accounts, so that they can answer some of those more not so in-depth questions right then.
And Sarah, do you want to talk about FAQs and how we use those a little bit more? She might say no. I don't know.
No, I can. So we do have FAQs in LibAnswers as well. And so we encourage people to use those in their chats. Is that what you mean, Rebecca?
Yes, and that we have a highly curated and robust set of FAQs.
Yeah, this process informs what our FAQs are. If we see things, we just say that should be an FAQ. Let's make an FAQ about that. And so that's how we get to like 220 FAQs that we have that are searchable, and it gets pretty comprehensive. So doing this also improves the design of our website and design. Like we can answer a lot of questions early on. And actually, I would say that's probably the biggest trend we've noticed. Sarah's done a great job on the website redesign. And so a lot of our questions that we were getting through chat are actually kind of probably being answered by the website itself now, which is we're noticing a transition and a change in the types of questions that we're getting because the website's a little bit different.
You mentioned the website, and one of the questions that came up that kind of ties to this is, how do you advertise your chat services?
So
Go ahead.
it's yours.
Oh, our chat service advertises itself. So we don't advertise our chat service. We have proactive chat, so the chat pops up when you stay on the page for a minute. And we have that turned on our web pages and inside Primo, like the search, and on our research guides, it all pops up and asks if you have a question. So we don't really have to advertise because people just use it through that.
And that also means they're coming to us while they're searching and when they have a question. So we're more likely to get research questions.
I saw a question that I thought maybe we should respond to because I've seen it a few times. Like, what do people do when they get feedback? Is there defensiveness, or is there, what if they don't agree with the feedback that you're given? And what I would say is that probably that does not happen often because of the tone that we kind of strike. But if there is a pattern that we're noticing of certain things, we do probably work with supervisors to think of interventions to sort of provide additional training or those types of things. What we admit all of the time in the way we approach chat is that this is very hard, and that what we're asking of our chat is probably a lot. There's a lot to be responsible for. And we understand that in general, most people are doing what I think is they're providing their best effort to do chat really well. And so then we think about what we can do to set them up to be a little bit better. And we notice trends and patterns that way. We have had interns that have had a harder time adjusting to chat. The speed of chat seems to throw interns off quite a bit early on. It's that it happens really fast, and I feel like I'm responsible. I need to be an oracle for all information. So I saw a lot of new librarians. That's a thing that you're going to experience, that like reference feels like it happens really fast. Eventually, it usually slows down. We've had interns in the past where there's been enough anxiety about that, where we've had to do some different things, have them kind of work and shadow somebody else for a little bit, share their chat services. And so I think once you open up more transparency and you create the notion that any chat can be evaluated and we're just doing it to try to improve the service, I think that really allows people to be more at ease. I think it's the tension of, I don't know, I hope somebody sees a chat that's bad. It's that if there's a general assumption that we're going to find if the chat's not going up to our expectations, we will know about it, but we're not going to single people out. And that's, Sarah mentioned this, we don't want, this is not a performance evaluation. We're not looking to give people promotions or fire people because of this. We're looking to make our services better. And like that, I think that vibe comes through with how Melissa runs our fireside chats. Like that's the tone that we have, is that we're all learning from each other and improving our services together.
I see a few things in the chat about doing things to demonstrate that we're not bots. And then people have shared that in classes, and I do this as well, telling people that we are real people, not bots. So
Yeah, I did that earlier today, and yesterday, sometime this week, the class was like, okay, let's time them. Let's see how fast they respond, which is something that we think is important. And somebody responded in, I think, under 8 seconds. And so the class was pretty happy with that as a response time.
I will say, as far as advertisement, we do have a weekly SMU Libraries email that goes out. And on there, it does have a link to our Ask Us, but it's very small and at the bottom. So most people don't find us that way.
there is a question of, would you be willing to share any of the training for interns that you've done? And if so, I see a thumbs up from Jonathan. What would be the best way for people to get that?
Yeah, probably just send me an email, because there's a lot of it. And I would probably want to know more about what you'd want out of that, because we have observation forms. We've got, we do one of the great activities. If you're looking for an activity to do to improve your service, Grow and Glow used to be called Good Chat, Bad Chat. And then one of our interns came up with a much better name for it. So take a chat that could have been better. There's opportunity for growth there. Take a chat that is an outstanding example of how you could provide public service, and then talk about those things together and notice what you see and how other people see different things. That's one of our great trainings that we have. And it's one of the examples of testing an intern's ability to recognize good chats and to recognize opportunities to make chats better. And that's an important skill on the way of being able to actually put that into action when you're doing chat. So there's a little bit of that. We read transcripts all the time together with the interns and kind of do a line by line. What would you say? Choose your own adventure. What would you say in this situation? And see what the person said. Those are a couple examples of some really good training sessions that we have with our interns.
I want to address the what counts as reference and versus consultations. Because data collection is really important to me, and that is such an understatement. Everybody else on this committee is laughing. No, reference questions are asked sort of in the moment. Anything that's a consultation has to be scheduled. The length should not have anything to do with how you evaluate what type of interaction it was, according to NISO standards, which hopefully are going to be changed soon. And if you want to talk about those things, let me know, because that's really where my interest lies, like more than it should. Anyway, I will hush now.
We do track length. We use SpringShare forms for reference transactions, and we do track the length their approximate length on that. But it's not the Qualtrics form is a supplement to the other stuff that you can get from SpringShare too. That's probably worth saying, is that we do use some SpringShare data as well to kind of do like the characteristics of the nature of our chat, where are people coming from, that kind of stuff.
Lots of good questions. I'm going to go back to one that was asked at the very beginning, when you mentioned drawing on the RUSA guidelines, and the person wrote that the RUSA guidelines are fairly long. Could you share a little bit more about how you use them?
I'm sorry, I missed that because I was responding.
Yeah, the question was, the RUSA guidelines are fairly long. Could you share a little bit more about how you use them?
Yes. Okay. So yes, they're fairly long. However, I'm looking at the date. We are doing a revision of them. I am chairing that task force for revising the RUSA behavioral guidelines. The newest iteration, which I think are going to be accepted with a few minor changes, are shorter overall than they have been in the past, and a little more directed. So ways that we use them, for the idea of interaction rather than transaction is part of the new guidelines, as is the idea of engagement and inclusivity. So we want to make sure that people feel comfortable asking questions. Something that we really like about chat is it's less off-putting to many people, rather than making them come to a desk and have library anxiety. I know not everyone agrees with the notion of library anxiety, and that's a whole other debate. But also, once again, the new reference guidelines are a question for another time. So if you want to ask me individually so I don't dominate this, please do.
Yeah. What I would say is the other way to kind of think about this is they are very long, but what we do with our form is to make them characteristics that are observable within the interaction itself. And so what does approachability or what does listening look like in one of our chats? And so we go through a lot of chats, and so you sample them and you say, okay, do we feel like this is doing an effective job of the RUSA guidelines? Why or why not? And then you pinpoint what are the behaviors that we would have liked to see. And then that starts to be the building blocks of how you develop a form. And so we used to call them like good characteristics of chats, like what we would want to see, and we called them bad habits, things that we were like, oh, that's actually, if you get into that habit, that's not a great habit. We divided that up to, like, that got a little confusing because we had like a positive and a negative one, so evaluating the data got a little difficult. So instead we just turned them into, do we see evidence of these types of behaviors, because those are the things that we would like to see. We had to give ourselves a sometimes and an NA option on some of that stuff too, because some of the things are maybe not applicable, or they're kind of mixed into how you would actually do them. And so that's one of the things. I would also say the RUSA guidelines, one of the biggest parts about integrating them into a kind of static form is that so many of the things you'd like to see in reference interactions are dependent on you doing something at the beginning of the transaction that enables something else. And so a lot of our conversations is around, okay, if they had done more of the reference interview or done a better job listening, what would we have seen if we had gone down this direction? So you get this like branching paths of this could have been a better interaction if they had done some different things at the beginning. And so that does get a little bit challenging about putting it into a static form.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I did sort of a deep dive in how people were evaluating reference, and most of them were based on the behavioral guidelines. So that's part of what informs a lot of the choices we've made, the way they've used that and the way that other people have used communication and relationship building.
So one of the other questions I'm seeing, like different types of questions that we get, we do have kind of a general assumption that anybody who works chat can answer an X percentage of the types of questions that are get. So if they're fairly common questions, we cross-train across the different things. So actually Jaleesa or somebody from her team comes into an intern meeting and we'll train the interns on how things work, how the back end works there, how ILL works, so that they are prepared to answer enough of those questions, or at least ask good questions that set up a good interaction if we do have to create a ticket. So there's a lot of cross training that goes on once you become a chat operator, which probably prevents some of the other teams to not become chat operators, because it might be too much for them to kind of jump on board with understanding how everything works in our chat. So there is kind of some cross training that happens too.
I want to be conscious of our time. We have about 6 minutes left, which would probably be time for maybe one more question, or any last words that you would want to share as panelists. And then I know Colleen has shared the evaluation form in the chat as well.
Just to answer one question that just came in, we do try and link students to our FAQs as often as possible. We do a lot of work into them to make sure they are up to date. They're continually living documents that we update as much as possible. So and like Jonathan said, we have over 200 of them. We try and make sure that they are as up to date, as accurate, as in depth and comprehensive. So we move them that way as often as possible.
Yeah, chat's about giving students agency. Our whole system's about giving students and giving our patrons agency to solve their own problems. Chat is a thing that we would love to, we want people to feel like they're more capable because they've interacted with our chat. And so FAQs help us do that. Our guides help us do that. And part of it is training our patron base to say, hey, look for these things too. Next time you have another question, there may be an FAQ here that actually resolves that. And so I think we do get a lot of that repeat business that way.
Any other final thoughts before we go ahead and start wrapping up? So many wonderful questions have been coming in. The chat has just been crazy. It's exciting to see a lot of excitement around, librarianship and this topic in particular.
I agree. It is a really great, I always think this is like the best thing to be a part of this team and be in this room to like nerd out about this kind of stuff is a lot of fun because like we genuinely like really care about that stuff. And one of the great parts is you get to see that it actually improves the quality of service. You're actually able to, you see things that you wouldn't be able to help people with that we're now feel capable of being able to do. And it's through investing in a lot of feedback and going through. It's worth the investment. It feels like a lot of tedious work, but it's absolutely worth it. It makes our service like what it is, I think.
I think you've gotten a pretty good impression of what our meetings are like when we all gather together, for better or worse. But we enjoy talking about this. It matters to us. So it's always a fun meeting.
Lots of discussion, but always lots of discussion with like we don't fight or get angry at each other or anything like that. So it's lots of productive discussion. So
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you all to our panelists for sharing your expertise with us today. But I'd also like to thank Aaliyah Price, as well as everyone in the ACRL office who always help make the magic happen for these presentations. Remember that we will send the link to the recording and other supplemental documents for this session when it is available. A reminder to please fill out our brief evaluation, a link to which has been posted in the chat window. Thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.